Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Hypertext Presents Mass Debate, where we debate on mass. Today, I'm joined by my lovely co-hosts, Robin-Leigh Chetty.
Howdy.
And Brendyn Lotz.
Hi, my name's Brendyn and I'm 12.
Yeah, I don't know if that joke will ever run its course.
I don't think so. I still laugh every time.
We keep going. You know, we have fun. We have fun.
It's ironic that this is one of the more serious of our podcasts, and it's got the. But who cares?
Yeah. So let's jump right into it. Today's topic in which we will be debating on mass is quite a pertinent one in the tech industry right now. I think if you're looking in headlines, there's usually one or two about this topic, and that is in-office versus hybrid/remote work. I think if you work in tech or in business or anything that isn't more technical or office-based work, you have dealt with this problem personally in your life. What's better in working at home, working in the office? What does your boss prefer you to do? What do you prefer to do? So I think. Jumping from this point, I think the history of remote work was kind of instantaneous one, at least for me.
Yeah.
As far as I'm sure you guys can also jump in with your own experiences, but for me, it was just like an overnight thing, right? Everything was in the office. You drive to work every day. You sit down, you do your work, and then you go home in the afternoon. And then all of a sudden, in March 2020.
The before times.
Yeah, the bright times. It was you can't work in the office anymore.
You couldn't even go out.
Yeah,
you couldn't unless you were going to get like supplies or something. You weren't allowed on the roads.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I quite liked it. I was in my Howard Hughes phase. just enjoying that life.
Just chilling from home. But yeah, that's basically what happened. Everyone had to go work in the office because of the hard lockdown of the pandemic. And it was kind of like we dealt with waves and waves of this, where it was the pandemic would ease a bit. There'd be less cases, and then you'd be let out into the world, or you can go to the office a bit more. And then slowly it kind of morphed into the hybrid work thing, where businesses kind of started juggling, costs of rent and other costs, and employees were like, well, if I'm at work, if I'm in the home more, I can do this and that. And it's better for me in this way. So we're still dealing with that debate right now. What's better? So let's get down to the actual debate.
Sorry, can I just jump in here?
Okay.
I actually I've been working from home since like 2017.
Oh, okay.
Hypertext actually switched to a remote/hybrid model.
So that
back
was,
in the before
that was
times.
before I joined.
Yeah.
I didn't know about
this
that.
This is well before. I'm now showing my age.
Okay.
But we've been working on like a hybrid model, sort of where we would meet to like do a podcast recording once a week, or just be in office like once or twice a week. So we've been working remotely for a long time. So when the pandemic hit, it was kind of just like business as usual,
right.
At least for me. But it was quite strange to see this massive shift all of a sudden to a new style of working for a lot of people. I remember I was staying with some friends at the time, and the way that they just had to suddenly work from home, I just remember a lot of chaos in the first couple of weeks and months after the lockdown orders were handed down. Just things like, how do you do a meeting? How do you monitor employees' time that they are spending? Like, all of this stuff had to basically be figured out on the fly. And I think that folks that were already doing hybrid or remote work policies were kind of just perfectly primed to deal with the pandemic. So, yeah, but like you say, obviously we've now switched to a more hybrid model where it's kind of like the cost of rent is high, right. I guess.
And Robin, do you have any kind of anecdotal stories about that time? What do you remember about switching to hybrid or?
So I guess when I got my first permanent job in the industry, I was already doing hybrid. So my previous employer, you do your 2 weeks there, kind of learning the ropes, kind of figuring out how things work, and then it was pretty much work remotely, come in once a week to, I guess, do meetings, any kind of important admin, as well as just checking out magazines and editing and stuff like that. All those kind of things that have to happen in person. But our model was very much a hybrid model. And for me, then joining Hypertext, it was quite easy to make that transition as well. I know that because I took on a different role at Hypertext, that I felt the need to be in the office more. But for the most part, it was very much hybrid, coming into the office maybe twice a week if needed. I know that we had an intern at that time, so kind of assisting them and being more hands-on there because they weren't able to travel as freely as I was able to due to lack of transport and stuff like that. But yeah, I think in general, I've been doing this for a decade now. But when the pandemic hit, as Brendyn mentioned, it was interesting to see how everyone else was kind of scrambling to understand how to get things done. And this was my kind of state of work for half a decade already.
Do you think it's a reach to say that you guys were in the minority of doing hybrid work at that time when all that stuff kind of happened?
Yeah, I don't think it's a reach. I think it's
true.
I think unless you're in software development, because I feel like there was a lot of remote work happening there, but I don't know of many other places that would allow you to work from home unless you were deathly ill for a week.
So I think a lot of tech industries and tech companies had some semblance of hybrid. It wasn't necessarily what it is now, where it's kind of 3 or 4 days at home and then 1 day at the office. It was kind of the inverse. So 3 or 4 days at the office and then 1 day at home. Yeah, so I think that was probably the biggest shift that I saw.
This might not matter, but at the time when you guys were doing this hybrid work before the pandemic, were your superiors a lot younger, where they're not from an older generation, more of the newer generation, more of the modern state of mind of things? Because I only ask that because when I started in the industry, my boss was much older than I was, kind of like the boomer generation in quotation marks.
Yeah.
And he he did not believe in hybrid work. He was in office. When employees go home, they don't work. No one works from home. You work in the office. Where your bosses are much younger. Is that why maybe you guys were allowed more hybrid work, or they preferred more hybrid work?
So yeah, I mean, they were obviously more senior than me, but in terms of age, they were younger than most of the CEOs of large companies, right? That insist on working from home. But I think that there was also a realization from management at that time that spending money on an office that people needed to come to every day was kind of silly when folks could just do the same job anywhere with an internet connection. And I mean, there were rules that were put in place, right? So that people knew you were working. And I mean, it's also very hard to not work when you're writing for a website that's publishing content regularly. I mean, your boss can see when you're not working, right? So I think that kind of helped in terms of productivity, is that everything that you're doing was still visible. And I do think that age played a part, because I think at that time, most newsrooms were still very much in office. You come into an office, you work 8 hours a day, and then you go home. I think when Hypertext switched to a remote model, it was very odd. I remember speaking to people in the industry, and they're like, "Oh, that's interesting. We haven't done that." But I mean, it seems to have worked.
I guess I have mixed experiences. So, kind of post graduating from university, you have to bide your time and do your penance with internships. And for example, I think it really depended on the publication. So I did an internship at EWN, which is a major news publication in South Africa, and it had a more traditional newsroom, so people had to be in the office. Right. Also, I think talk of hybrid work at that time wasn't really spoken about at all. And then I went to intern at a publication in Cape Town. And because I was an intern, things like data, a notebook to work on, learning the ropes and stuff like that had to be in person.
Okay.
So when I then shifted to my, the previous publication before I joined Hypertext, that although the online work was pretty much the same as the internship in Cape Town, the need to be in the office wasn't there.
Right.
So I think it really depends on your role and what it means, or rather what the publication values, or rather what the business values. So if you, for example, are sweating an asset, it behooves you to have your employees in the office. If people are able to work remotely and things like data, connectivity, stuff like that isn't really an issue,
Right.
then I think, the environment kind of lends itself well to hybrid. But I'm sure we'll get into all those fine points later on. But those are kind of, I've had like a mixed bag as far as that goes.
So obviously, none of us here are interning anymore. But if you are interning and you're listening to this, it will be interesting to see or to hear from your perspective if you're actually given more opportunity to be hybrid nowadays. Even taking into account what Robin just said, that if you're still learning the ropes, it's better to be in the office. So send us a message on X, the former Twitter, or reach out and let us know. And with that, I think we can get into the debate section of this program. Brendyn will be arguing for hybrid/remote work, and Robin will be arguing for in office. And we can maybe jump into our first kind of question. Robin, what do you think are the advantages of working in the office compared to working at home?
So I have to kind of look at this through the lens of a media/publishing background.
Okay.
And for me, the advantage of working in an office is purely collaboration and immediacy. Anyone that's kind of worked in a newsroom or in a collaborative environment like that knows that being in person, it just is better. There is a faster exchange of ideas. There isn't the hesitancy to message on a messaging platform and kind of figure out what you can just kind of talk as you feel and
turn around.
There's almost like a stream of consciousness thing that happens, and because everyone's in the same space together, I feel like there's the advantage of actually getting things done far more quicker. So that's my view as far as the kind of key advantage of working in the office. That also said, for a lot of people, their home environment might not necessarily be geared up for work. For example, when you hit an office, you might have a kitchen, you might have supplies, a printer, things like that. Not everyone has I don't have a home printer, for example. Right. So I'm always heading to Postnet or somewhere to go and get my documents printed nowadays. But if there's a physical office, you have those assets there available to you, and you don't necessarily have to worry about it. So I think there are those kind of advantages to being in an office compared to hybrid/remote.
Okay, and Brendyn, advantages of hybrid/remote, taking into consideration what Robin just said.
So I think that's one of the primary things that people cite when they're looking at hybrid or remote working or hybrid working, whichever one, instead of being in an office full time, is the sort of mental health break it gives you. Okay. I think that interacting with people all the time and hearing John in accounting's marriage woes for the fifth time this week, and not just that, just also sitting in traffic all day and not being in a space where you're comfortable can take a toll on you mentally. Now, the same thing can be said for spending hours and hours alone in your home office. But I think that when you're working from home, there's a lot more freedom. I mean, I can step out for 5 minutes to go and get milk from up the road. Whereas I might not be able to do that in an office situation, or I can take a personal call without having to go outside of the office area. So, I mean, there's the convenience side of it, there's the time-saving side of it, right? Where before I would have to wake up at, say, like 5 o'clock in the morning to get to work on time. Now I can wake up 30 minutes before work starts, and I get more rest. There's benefits to spending more time with family. I've mentioned the traffic thing, which is a massive issue. I think the problem with this, though, is that there's all sorts of esoteric benefits.
Right.
When it comes down to things like productivity, like there's a number of studies that would say, like, oh, employees are more productive at home, but then there's as many studies that say employees are less productive when they're working from home. And the problem with that is that a lot of these studies kind of focus in on one thing or look at one aspect of it. So a lot of them will look at the software that's used for remote working, where you're monitoring employees, but we know that employees can fleece that. Put your mouse attached to your dog while you take a nap or whatever it may be. So I think that a lot of the questions about what the benefits are of working remotely are still up in the air. I mean, it's only been 3 years. We haven't had time to study the long-term effects, how much more productive employees are when they're working from home. From my own anecdotal experience, I feel like I'm more productive when I'm working from home. I can knock out the stories I need to, do the research I need to in less time than it would take me in an office, because I don't have a little funny quip that I want to add or have to ask something, and now I can just type it into Google. It's a more solitary experience, absolutely, but I think if you're the type of person who doesn't mind working in solitary confinements, as it were, then I think that it's a better solution for you.
Okay, so there was a lot to unpack there. Robin, do you agree that people generally dislike their coworkers? Is that a thing where it's like, God, I have to go into the office and have to deal with all these people? So Brendyn said that was one of the advantages, is that you don't have to. Basically, your mental health is better because you don't have to deal with your coworkers. Is there something there? Is that true?
I think there's a tinge of truth. You're not going to get along with everyone. That's life. So there are obviously going to be coworkers that you don't like. But I think at the same time, human beings are social animals. You have to kind of have different experiences in order to kind of have a fully rounded life, as it were. So, sure, some people might hate their coworkers, but you could also argue that some people might hate their jobs for different reasons. I think coworkers is a small element, and ultimately, you can't really control that regardless of what environment you're working on, because I can still hate you
through the internet.
Yeah, I can still hate you via Slack as opposed to in person. So yeah, it doesn't really. I understand what that kind of point, but to my mind, not everyone's going to get
just suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah.
So the other thing there, what Brendyn said was true, in that hybrid work has only been around for a short amount of time, and there have been just as many studies for as there's been studies against. But then why? And I posed a question to both of you. I think we can start with Brendyn.
Yeah.
The why then are people en masse refusing to return to the office?
I think it's because we've now had a taste of the freedom, right? You've had this taste of, oh, well, I mean, I'm still getting my work done. As an individual employee, you're looking at it and going, well, I mean, I'm still getting my work done every day. I'm attending all my meetings. I'm hitting all my targets. Like, why should I go back into the office if I can do as good a job, if not better, from home? And I mean, I think that it's also indicative of just the economy in general. Like, wear and tear on your vehicle, the petrol price is pretty damn high. With load shedding in South Africa, that's a major concern. That adds like an hour to your commute. So I think that all of these things have coalesced, and people have now gotten a taste of what it's like to work from home. And it's very hard to convince them to go back, because the alternative is as good as what was happening before, at least in the eyes of an individual employee. Whether that is the case, though, I mean, that's up for senior management to decide. Right. And unfortunately, for a lot of these big companies, when they report their financials for the year and they still have people working from home, and they, record profits, record this, record that, which we saw a lot of during the pandemic. We saw a lot of companies reporting massive profits, and that's been used as a sort of explanation for why work from home is justified. But what I think a lot of these things fail to take into account is that there was also massive spikes in certain services, right? People needed webcams, people needed IT support, they needed computers. So all of these, there was a boom during the pandemic because, I mean, I attribute it to wartime, right? War raises all ships, right? Like every tide. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. Because, I mean, we've had the pandemic and it's shown us that working from home is great for some people, but it also showed that a lot of industries aren't very good for that, right? Like service industries, for one. I don't know if you guys dealt with a call center during the pandemic or call center agent. It was a gamble on whether you would get somebody with a really clear line or whether you get the person that's dealing with 50 family issues, a fire, and a barking dog.
Right.
So I think it's very much a per situation sort of decision that needs to be made.
And Robin, we've seen some really high, notable rather CEOs, Mark Zuckerberg's and of the world, and the Jeff Bezos, telling employees and the Elon Musk, let us not forget, telling employees that they need to return to office. Why do they want their employees back in the office? Is it just a productivity thing? Is it just an efficiency thing? Like, what is the reason? Well, especially when, as Brendyn says, the numbers are so good with people working from home. What is the argument?
So I think the argument is twofold. One is that those kind of tech CEOs that you mentioned all have businesses that have massive physical assets, i.e. their campuses. If those campuses aren't being filled with people using it, they are sweating an asset now. So I think from that perspective, they want people in the office because now they have spent all this expense on something that essentially is now not being used. So it doesn't make sense. Also, we have to keep in mind there are several tax incentives in terms of items that can be written off now that you have people in the office. All the equipment, for example, all those fancy, cool things that they have the Google campus, all that nice cafeteria food and stuff,
and
like
the Quidditch and the
all those cool things. Those can all be written off to some extent, depending on how clever you are with your taxes and stuff like that. So, from that perspective, I think they have a physical asset that they need to worry about. And then the other element as to why is purely to monitor. Yes, you can kind of gauge how people are working online, and I'm not talking about kind of monitoring, like actual physical monitoring of their activity on screen and stuff like that, but you can kind of see what's happening, what's being produced. But there's something to be said that there is something different about actually seeing people in the office, seeing people engaging, seeing people doing work. There's something, I guess, there's a mental element to it that you're actually seeing the work happening in front of you, that you think that work is being done. So I think those are kind of the two main elements that a lot of these CEOs are kind of pushing as far as rather the agenda as to why they want people back in the office. So
the campus question is interesting because I'm like, does Google really need its campus to maintain its $1 trillion profits, right? Like, is that not just an ego thing on the part of the CEOs then?
So I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, if you have a great campus, people want to work there.
Right.
Because these people are dedicating so many hours to their job. If you have a great environment, if you are kind of baking in things like a great cafeteria,
it's
for example, sleeping pods, things like that. The entire work culture.
Right.
If you're building that into your kind of business model and your environment that people are working in, that's a huge plus for a lot of people, I think.
Brendyn, do you think work culture is really that important for a lot of people? Like, is it if you wanted to work at Google, apart from the salary, apart from the name status, is going to the campus every day something that would have attracted you?
Yeah. Did you see those? Did you see that cafeteria at the Googleplex? No, but I think that I can't argue this point that company culture is not something that you can do remotely. That's just not. I think during the pandemic, I saw a lot of companies try it with like, we're going to do a team Zoom call and do yoga at 5:00 in the morning.
Right.
No, I'm not doing that. I'm not. I'm going to open the Zoom call. I'm going to switch off my microphone, and then I'm going to watch series for the duration of this yoga session. And I think that it's near impossible to breed company culture or a culture within your company remotely because you can communicate with people over Slack and over Zoom and video conferencing, but it's not the same. Like, I think after my friends and I had done like our second Zoom call during the pandemic of like, oh, hey, this is so fun. We were just like, yeah, this is lame. Let's just go back to Discord and chat while we play games.
Right, like normal.
The novelty wears off very quickly. And having worked remotely for so long, I can say that it does get really lonely. And you eventually start craving that human interaction. Like, I had the benefit of having a housemate, but like just to go back to what Robin said, the collaboration, the almost hive mind that you are creating, a stream of consciousness, like that does matter, and it helps people feel like they're fitting in. Like Bob in accounting, who's constantly telling you about his family issues, like he's part of that culture, right? Yeah. Whether I like him or not, I would still miss him if he just disappeared one day. So I think that company culture is something that you can't do remotely. And for me, if there was a company that was fully remote, I would question whether everything is okay at that company, and whether there's a system of crunch, whether the managers are going to be calling me after hours. Like, there's certain things that working in an office you can't replicate online.
Just on that culture point, I know I'm arguing for in office, but when we're talking about company culture, I think it's more important. It's tangibly more important for employees, and it's optically important for employers. So employers want to espouse and evangelize the importance of company culture to make it a great place to work. However, when push comes to shove, if the profits are not being made, if investors are not being kept happy, company culture goes out the window.
I agree with that, but I also think that if you work for a company, you need to realize that.
Sure.
You need to realize that at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, profits are going to be because what else is a business there to do but make money?
Yeah, I'm just kind of taking the more cynical view that whenever we kind of go to big tech conferences, kind of really around organizations and business and how they kind of deal with their whole culture, a lot of jargon is thrown around, but I think at the end of the day, it's all about profits and losses when it comes to when CEOs are making decisions. So yes, if you have a great company culture, that's amazing. But at the end of the day, that falls secondary to profit.
Okay, so another big, I guess, talking point, or maybe buzz term in the corporate sphere at the moment, and you see it when you look at most of these big tech shows. I mean, we saw it at the Samsung Unpacked, I think last week or last week or the week before, is the environment question. Apple is putting a lot of money behind recycling and trying to reduce their carbon footprint and so on and so on. And obviously during the pandemic, when everyone had to go home, there was much less cars on the road. That means much less fossil fuels in the air. We all saw the memes about nature is healing and all that stuff. The deer in the streets, humans aren't around and stuff.
Dolphins,
dolphins have returned. It's the manatees, But is there any truth to that? Like, Brendyn, is hybrid work better for the environment than going to the office?
So it's a bit weird because, like you mentioned, right? No, there's fewer cars on the road. There's less carbon dioxide going into the air, but those offsets are kind of eliminated when you take into account that now everybody's at home. They're in their den of comfort. They probably have the TV on. They have a stove boiling for lunch. They have a kettle going. So there's been a couple of studies. We'll link to one as always. But this study kind of found that the offsets of not traveling were kind of negated by the fact that everybody was working from home and still using electricity. I'm sure you guys remember we had load shedding return in the midst of the pandemic while we were under lockdown, and that was largely due to demand being way higher because folks were at home. And you can kind of see this in play today with load shedding being at higher stages after hours because there's more demand on the network because people are at home, they're cooking dinner, they're using their geysers. Like, your own usage isn't just negated because it's lower than a industrial corporation, right? You're still using and you still have a carbon footprint. So I think that, is it better for the environment? I can't say. I'm not an environmentalist. But from what I've seen, it's not really better. But on the same token, neither is having a city full of office spaces, right? With huge skyscrapers that are just pumping waste into the air, carbon dioxide, using electricity, all this sort of stuff. Something that still shocks me to this day is driving through Joburg CBD and seeing all the skyscrapers at night with lights still on in the offices, and you kind of like, is there anybody in those offices? Or driving through office parks in the outskirts of Johannesburg, there's still lights on everywhere. So I think in terms of like individual usage, it may feel better that you're not driving around, so therefore you're not pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. But whether it's better for the environment overall working from home, I don't think it is.
Robin, same question to you. Is it why would in office, if everyone just went back to the office tomorrow, do you think that would be better for the environment?
So, outside of the commuting, I would argue that you can set up a environment in an office that is more geared towards or emphasizes eco-friendliness than remotely at someone's home. You can, for example, implement a recycling program in an office. You can, for example, get solar for an office building. Not everyone has the capacity to have solar installed at their homes. So I think there are better ways to offset at a larger scale from an office than it would be for every single person to kind of take on that responsibility. So, and we also have to think that just because people are working from home doesn't mean that they are less, their carbon footprint is smaller. They're still going to be doing the things that they do that create a lot of greenhouse gases and stuff like that.
So yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, that was a really good point about a company being able to do a lot more than an individual. I think that's something that like a lot of people don't think about, because I mean you could pay like 100,000 rand for a solar setup, and you power a whole office, and an individual has to do that alone for their one home, which is just ludicrous. So that was a really good point.
So I feel like we're missing something here, because despite what I'm hearing from Brendyn, that we can't prove that working remotely is better for productivity, better for efficiency, better for mental health, and better for the environment. And yet people will continue to fight to stay working from home. You see it in the headlines. Why?
It's freedom and flexibility, right?
Right.
Or potentially the illusion of freedom and flexibility. Because in my view anyway, I found it specifically during the pandemic as well, that although everyone was working remotely, your time wasn't really your own. Because I remember having to decline a whole bunch of online and virtual meetings and presentations because everyone assumed that because you're at home that you have time available. And you simply did not. You still had to work. So I think that the flexibility that people perceive they have when they work from home isn't actually there, because also when you're working from home, when is the cutoff time? When do you actually stop working? Because you don't have, I guess, the commute home, the work you perhaps started at 4 o'clock will bleed into 6 o'clock, for example, and it carries on going. And I really hate this, but now everyone wants to message you on WhatsApp.
Instead of the normal channel.
Go through via email.
Right.
WhatsApp is for friends and family, in my view. It's not for me to get emails from my boss messages from my boss or coworkers about something that is work-related. That's what email is for. That's what my htxt.coza email address is for, not my personal phone number.
Right.
Personal phone numbers, when you're calling me, it better be an emergency.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I think, that there's a perception that you have more greater flexibility and choice if you're working from home. And I don't think that's necessarily the case for everyone.
So, Brendyn, Robin says that, in fact, there's not even more flexibility when you work from home. What do you think about that?
So I think that it depends on what job you're doing, because if you have to be available from 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the afternoon, then yes, you're not going to have much flexibility. But if you're like, say, a developer that's working towards a project completion, and nobody's watching you from 9 until 5, just as long as you get the work done, I think there's more flexibility in terms of you don't need to go into the office from 9 to 5 to do your work. You could start working at 9 p.m. and work until 5 a.m., right? Because some people are a bit more active at night. Some people work better in the afternoon. Some people want to have an afternoon nap. And so I think that there is flexibility depending on what your job is. Like some, there just aren't going to be, right? If you're working for a company where you need to be online from 9 until 5, you might as well just be in an office then.
Right.
Because what's the point of working from home? Yeah, you can maybe sneak out for lunch, to your favorite corner cafe, but beyond that, is that really flexibility? I do agree with Robin in that aspect, where if your employer is the type of person that's going to be watching over your shoulder all the time, then of course you're not going to have any sort of flexibility or freedom whatsoever. But I think in terms of like development, even marketing to a large extent, like I think there is room for a hybrid model as long as it suits the end goal of the business, right? You don't want to be, we can work from home, and then you only work from 9, like I said, from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. That doesn't really help anybody, especially if you need to collaborate with people.
Right.
So yeah, I think that yeah.
Okay. So
that's what I have to say.
So we touched on the mental health stuff, and I kind of just want to go back there because I remember during the pandemic, you would hear about these horror stories about. There was one in particular that I remember reading. I think it was from 4chan. It was like a green text thread or something. The guy apparently, and take it with a grain of salt, but apparently he got a job, a remote job. He was a developer, so he was programming, and he would sit at home, program all day. The boss or the company would send him assignments, and he'd program them, and then he would get his groceries and his food delivered to him, and he would get. This is like after the pandemic, so the thing when stuff after the pandemic, when stuff started kind of calming down, he'd get his food delivered to him, and then he would spend all his day playing video games, so he wouldn't actually go outside for anything. He'd watch YouTube tutorials to exercise.
I haven't heard a problem yet.
And then he started saying like, I'm living in a simulation. Is the world real? Are people real? Like, am I in the Matrix right now? Like,
is this a touch grass scenario?
Is there something to that? Like, should we not be more out there? Should we not see more people? Should we not? That's something like I personally think about. Should I not? How much time do I spend by myself? Is it good to spend so much time by myself? What do you guys think about that? Do you have any opinions there?
I think that Robin mentioned it. We are social animals as humans. Like, as much as you may want to deny it, if you're not interacting with people, that it does take a toll on you. I've noticed it in myself. I've noticed it in other people. There are countless studies you can find online about this. But like when the pandemic hit, people started to feel a lot lonelier. If you were sitting in an apartment by yourself, like, it's all good and well to live alone, but when you're forced to stay in those four walls 24/7, 365, like, that takes a mental toll on you. It has to. So I think that you do need to interact with people. And it's not just for, like, being social. It's also just to learn things, right? Like, there's only so much you can learn in front of a computer. We're also all biased. We are very biased creatures. So, like, if you're trying to find out about something, you're going to just type in something that fits your narrative or that fits your point of view. But being exposed to other people exposes you to other ideas, exposes you to new things, new concepts, things that challenge you and make you really question your core beliefs. So I think that to say that, like, it's... Look, I enjoy staying at home alone as much as the next person and not being bothered while I play games and gorge myself on pizza. But at some point, you do need to interact with other people. And we can say that, like, yeah, there's Zoom and Slack and all that sort of stuff. But, Like, there's certain things that you will notice about a person if you spend enough time with them when they're feeling a bit down. Maybe they need somebody to talk to, and you can't gauge that stuff over Slack. So I think a hybrid model is probably best. It's the best of both worlds. It gives you the freedom to work from home when you want to, but also that very important human connection.
Robin, should we touch more grass? I'm all for touching grass, but around that 4chan story, I think we have to look at it through the lens of the pandemic. You want to touch grass on the weekend. If you really want to touch grass.
Right.
We're not really confined to our homes anymore. I think that's the important thing to note about that story. So I know that I'm arguing for in-office, but you can work remotely and then go touch some grass afterwards or on the weekend. So
It's like it's up to you. You make that scenario for yourself, basically.
yeah.
Okay.
Can I introduce a cat amongst the pigeons here?
Go for it.
What about the 4-day work week? Do we think that
Is
is something?
Europe?
I mean, this is what I'm saying. But I mean, it's gathering steam in lots of markets around the world. Do we think that a 4-day work week is actually something that's going to happen?
Do we need to work on Fridays?
I'm sorry, but maybe I'm self-reporting here, but do people really work on Fridays?
I mean,
After 12 o'clock, do people work on Fridays?
We work on Fridays.
I hope so. I hope we work on Fridays. But generally speaking, productivity
after
dips
12
massively.
dips. But I mean, why not at that point just call Friday weekend day number 3? I mean, I just think that
So I'm all for that, but then the salaries must be the same. And that's
the kicker.
And that's a problem.
Yeah.
Salaries will take a hit.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the salaries are per day, right? Per diem.
Yeah, for a lot of people, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I just thought, like, let's just throw that cat amongst the pigeons. I personally don't think it's something that will take off. I think, like Robin says, the salary thing is a big question mark. I've heard of companies doing it successfully, but all of them are like very new age software development sort of company or a marketing company, and we all know that both of those sorts of companies stop working on a Friday at midday, as Robin alluded to.
Yeah, I'm all for it if it happens, but then I need the same.
The same salary.
Yeah, the paycheck must be the same.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry for the upheaval.
So
Carry on.
The other big buzzword, I mean, we've written about it, we talked about it a lot, is AI, right?
Yeah.
AI and its potential to change the job market, right? So I'll start with Robin. Do you think AI is affecting the situation between in office or at home? Like, is it changing things up? Is it making it easier to work remotely? Is it making it easier to work at home? Is it doing anything there?
I don't think it's doing anything as far as the argument around in-office versus hybrid or remote working. I do, however, think that it is having an impact when it comes to it's bringing up the automation argument again.
Right.
Like pre-pandemic, a lot of industries are looking to automate their processes. Mining is a great example of that. And there was the whole debate around upskilling and reskilling. So
Learn to code, miners.
Yes.
I remember those.
yeah, so I don't know. Zama's going to be learning to code and all that kind of stuff on what laptops they're learning to code. But anyway, so I think it's bringing up that debate again. I don't think it will have an impact as far as in office versus remote, because in that context, work is just work.
Right.
It's really about what AI will bring to the picture as far as automating and then potentially supplanting humans as far or rather.
And it doesn't matter whether you're at work or at home. AI has the same potential to supplant your
Yeah,
job.
I believe so, yeah.
Right. Brendyn, what do you think?
So I think that there are a lot of companies who are not above using AI as a stick rather than a carrot, and kind of saying to employees, well, if you want to work from home, we're just going to use AI. We're just going to train an AI bot to replace you. Which I think is a concern. Whether that is possible, I don't know. But I'm also very aware of how dastardly some companies can be.
Right.
And I think that a lot of companies are not above using AI to kind of threaten workers. But that could be the same for working in an office, right? You could say, well, I mean, if you guys aren't here on a Saturday, then we'll just have AI come and do the job.
Right.
So I think that AI is a threat in the sense of it can be used as a sort of bargaining tool, or improperly using it as a bargaining tool, to correct myself. So I think it is a threat in that regard, and we are seeing companies already kind of saying, well, you know, we don't need these employees, we can just replace them with AI.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, job losses are just a problem in general, as we saw throughout 2023. Mm-hmm. So I think that AI is, I think it is a threat in terms of work, like especially work that can be repeated, like data capturing, all that sort of stuff. I think that AI can replace people in that regard. So I don't think it's either good or bad, but there's a lot more bad that it can be used for.
Okay. I think that kind of sets us up for our closing arguments portion. I'd like you guys to finally give me an answer. What will the future of work look like? Will it be hybrid? Will it be in the office? Or will it be totally remote? Robin?
I think it will be hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I'm arguing in office, but I think logically speaking, it will probably be hybrid.
Why?
Purely for the fact that the pandemic showed it could be done.
Mm.
I think that also employees want that flexibility, regardless if it's genuine or not. I also believe that businesses are starting to now think about how they handle their assets. Mm. If they, for example, have, say, 20 hot desks and they have 60 employees, they just rotate them in terms of the hybrid model. So you have a smaller real estate as far as that you have to manage, but you still have the same workforce in terms of the size. So I think hybrid will be the way of the future, but it will require companies to rethink how they handle their workforce or how they engage with their workforce, right, and vice versa.
Because if they do, then they can allow their employees to have that flexibility, but also they can save money, and there's lots of benefits to a hybrid kind of a more centrist approach to things.
Yeah.
Brendyn, same question to you. What will be the future of work?
So I think it depends largely on what business looks like in the future. I think if we still have a reliance on things that require people to be overseen, I think it will be in office. We're seeing that trend at the moment where more and more businesses are telling companies or telling employees to come back to office. I think there was recently an instance where a CEO basically threatened employees to come back to office in a really poorly worded video that went public. So I think that companies, and especially folks within the middle management sector, require people to be in office so that they can oversee them. And those are jobs. Whether you like or dislike your middle management team, those are still jobs that people need to put food on the table for their families. But then again, if work shifts to stuff that is more digital, if we have VR become a thing, the metaverse become a thing, even though Zuckerberg et al. Have largely abandoned that dream,
right,
I think that would be more suited towards in office. In reality, though, I have to side with Robin because I think that hybrid is the perfect balance between having folks in an office and having folks have the flexibility of working from home. And with more and more discussion about a 4-day work week happening around the world, I think that a hybrid work situation is very largely a nice compromise between both parties. It gives folks the ability to say, well, I'm at home on this and this day. That gives families the ability to work from home. Like a mom and a dad can stack their days so that they're at home on different days with baby or whatever it may be. So I think we don't know what the future holds, but I think that hybrid is the one that makes the most sense.
So you know who does think they know what the future holds is CEOs. So according to a KPMG study that they interviewed 1,300 global CEOs, who knows who they are, but they're global and they're CEOs. They found that they believe, the CEOs believe that, or 64% of CEOs, so a majority of the CEOs believe that everyone will be working back in the office by 2026. That's in 2 years.
I mean, Yeah, but they also probably said, if you asked them in 2016, will anybody work from an office ever? They probably said no.
Right.
And then 4 years later, a pandemic hit. So, best made plans of mice and men.
Additionally, 87% of CEOs said they would lavish favorable assignments, raises, and promotions on employees who came to the office. So there is a wide-ranging preference towards employees working in the office.
But then why hire remote workers in the first place? Why even allow that if you're going to punish those who are now working remotely? Like, I understand if it's now like, oh, we're trying to lure people back to the office. But if these CEOs, if none of them hire a remote worker, I would be shocked. Right. Are you letting go of your cloud provider? You're letting go of your IT team. You're letting go of your IT support team. Because I guarantee you a lot of those people are not working in an office.
So do you guys think that's just like a personal preference in the CEOs?
Yeah, I think it's a personal preference. I also would argue that given the current job losses across various industries, unfortunately, unless you are like...
You're making 50% of the revenue.
Yes, unless you're super highly skilled, like your abilities are sought after in the market. You're getting headhunted on a weekly basis.
Right. Yeah.
You cannot choose. You are going to have to go into the office if this company says that's our policy. Right. That's an unfortunate thing.
Man, could you imagine the industrial era, the start of the industrial era, and the workers were like, "We want work from minute," and probably was the guy looking at what?
Well, you heard it here. The future looks like it's hybrid, even though it seems to me that there are a lot more benefits to working in the office, honestly. Especially because we can't actually prove, 100% that working from home is better for you, better for your work, better for... there are some things where you can save money if more people work from home. But I think the question then becomes a personal preference for employees, and employers have to kind of, stay on the good side of the employees and figure out how to kind of placate their employees with also figuring out to save money. So I agree with you guys. I think hybrid will be the future, despite what 1,300 global CEOs say. And I think that calls our mass debate for the day.
Awesome.
Are you guys happy with that? You guys think that's a good way to understand the future of work?
Yeah.
So I didn't win, is that what you said?
Okay. So thanks you guys for listening. From Louis Monzon, I would say goodbye for now. Check us out on hct.co.za. Check us out on X. Check us out on LinkedIn if you want. Whatever. Come look at our stuff. We do good stuff. From Brendyn Lotz.
Cheerio.
From Robin-Leigh, Chetty.
Take care, everyone.
And see you guys next time.